Hello and welcome to N.e.p.a. Investigates. My name is Corey Camasso, and today we're going to be covering a topic that is very sensitive and very important. It's something that we debated on whether we were going to cover it all, for the simple fact that were we really able to cover it, being that, our staff is primarily Caucasian individuals, and this is something where we needed multiracial input. So what we've done over the past 2 weeks is literally attend every single solitary protest that was available in Wilkes-Barre, and on days that we weren't covering in Wilkes-Barre, we did cover in Scranton. We did have multiple interviews. We've had many of these peaceful protests covered online. We as well covered 2 small infractions that really had nothing to do with the peaceful protests that happened in Wilkes-Barre, as well as Scranton. So first, let's talk about why we're here today and why we're even having this discussion. This goes back about 3 weeks now, where we had the individual named George Floyd. Mr. Floyd had utilized a, at the time, detected counterfeit $20 bill to purchase a pack of cigarettes. After purchasing the cigarettes, he and 2 occupants of his vehicle made their way back to their car. This is in Minnesota. Then the officers obviously were called to the scene when they detected the counterfeit bill. Mr. Floyd was still present, so they interrogated Mr. Floyd. They asked him to step out of his car. When he initially attempted to step out of the car, he did resist a little bit, not enough to warrant what would follow. At that point, they ran the IDs, they checked everything, and they deemed it necessary to arrest Mr. Floyd. In doing so, that's where the video picks up, and you see Officer Derek Chauvin and Officer Tao, both of which were clearly visible for the majority of the video. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, murderer Derek Chauvin decided to put his knee on the back of Mr. Floyd's neck and literally choke the life out of him. Not only is this disgusting and despicable, it is a clear sign that we need reform and change within the training and the way police handle certain situations. And that's exactly where the Black Lives Matter movement picked up and everything started to gain traction. Obviously, right before George Floyd, we had the Ahmaud Arbery case, where we had 3 Caucasian individuals track down and assassinate, in my opinion, an African-American jogger that they assumed was the person who, quote-unquote, matched descriptions that had been breaking into homes and, stealing things. There's absolutely no proof to this, and none of those 3 individuals, even if there was proof, none of these 3 individuals had that proof when they decided to play cop and murder this young man. So the country was already outraged, and then George Floyd. What immediately followed the aftermath was you had 2 groups of people. You had the protesters who had the valid cause for anger and hate, not even hate, anger and resentment towards the authority and the police figures for the murder of yet another African-American individual. This was clearly racially motivated. We'll get to that in a few moments. But what we really have in this situation now is you have a movement that is gaining traction by the moment. And now you have literally every media source covering this. You've got people home from COVID. Not everyone has returned to work. You've got a platform unlike ever before with social media, being that it is. We're forced to social distance. We're forced to use masks. We're forced to stay home. And what you have now is this perfect storm. So while it's so unfortunate that Mr. Floyd had to die, the time that he passed away was almost impeccable, because it now gives this Black Lives Matter movement the traction that it's so desperately needed. Because we're personally sick and tired of seeing innocent people killed purely by either racial hate or the lack of police training. Derek Chauvin and Tao, in my opinion, Tao, were the 2 officers, in my opinion, that both should have been charged with the murder. Mr. Tao was informed on multiple occasions he was not breathing, he could not move, he could not breathe. Please tell the other officer to at least alleviate some of the pressure on this man's neck, and they choose to do nothing of the sort. That's murder. That is murder by silence. The other 2 officers, you have Thomas Lane and J. Alexander Quang, both of which, as well as, unfortunately, Tao, have been charged with aiding and abetting the murder of George Floyd. So while I don't think that those charges are severe enough at this point, I do understand that that is what they will literally, the best that they'll be able to be convicted of based on the situation at hand. While you may not agree with that, that is yet another thing that we need to look at and reform. Now, that's where we're going to get into where the movement currently stands, where it, in our opinion, it needs to go, and sadly, where certain sects of this group are moving it to. So now we have something happening where the movement is actually losing traction as a result, and that's through vandalism. There are a great deal of statues in our country that represent things that aren't necessarily fair. And while they are part of our history, and they are the things that brought us to the point to which we are, while we may not agree with Christopher Columbus, frankly, in my opinion, he landed in the wrong place. He named the people the wrong people. He had slaves, this, that, and the other thing. So in today's day and age, he'd be a nobody. I'm not trying to be rude or bash at my history, but in today's day and age, he would more than likely be a nobody. He'd be a failure by today's standards. So then you have, all the Civil War statues, which, while, yes, they fought for things that are terrible, they fought against releasing slaves, but at the time, these weren't things that people understood. Can you really blame a child for doing something if he didn't know any better? Can you blame a dog for doing something if they didn't know any better? Well, sadly, that's what I'm referring my ancestors to, a dog or a child. They didn't know any better. These were the things that they were taught were right. These were the things that they had understood as factual information. And while today we are much more enlightened and understand the differences, these are still parts of our history. And these are still things that we need to understand where we came from and why we've made those changes. So to deface or to destroy a statue of a Civil War soldier, an individual who literally was only following orders, frankly, while it does not belong in a center of city or somewhere where everyone who it could cause pain to can see it, it is certainly not something, it's a piece of art if nothing else, and it certainly does not need to be destroyed. There needs to be monument museums, places where these portions of our history that we may not be so proud of, but they are still portions of our history, and that is what makes us who we are. That's part of our fiber. Whether we like that or not, it's still what we are. And we have to understand, remember, and learn from our mistakes. Well, we don't need to be reminded daily by seeing it on the square. I understand that completely, and I completely agree, and so do most Americans. But to destroy them is, in a sense, destroying the ability to negotiate. And right now, you have the golden key of negotiation. You have the ability to bring everyone to the table, state your demands, and you will get them. But to do it the opposite way is only going to irrationally pull people that once had favor in, they were starting to get it. And by doing things like this, you're pushing those people away. And while you might say, well, we don't need them people. We don't need them for our movement. We need everybody, because this movement is about everyone. This unity movement, Black Lives Matter, everything, it's all about unity. You want equality. You want to be equal. You want to have the rights that every other person has. You want to be able to walk through a Walmart and not be followed. You want to be able to walk into a job interview and know that the color of your skin is not going to determine whether or not you receive that job, but rather the talent that you bring to the table and the ambition that you show within that interview. That's what counts. And that's what this movement needs to focus on. And I have seen over the last 2 weeks so many culturally brilliant people, so many people with such ambition and drive. And they're not the ones that are approving of the statue being desecrated, because they understand there's a thing called a petition to have it removed and replaced. And I suggest have it replaced with something that shows unity. Do a multicultural piece of art. You have every single race that's involved in this community enter a contest. This contest is picked on by the rest of the citizens. This way, there's no way this can offend somebody. We all had a chance to vote on it. We all had a chance to put in our parts. And then at that time, each culture can add a piece to this artistic part, and it shows the unity that makes a community. Unity is in community for a reason. It's unity. And that's what we need to bring back to our communities. So, you have George Washington, Orville Hubbard, Don Juan de Ornate, Ponce de Leon, Robert E. Lee, and my favorite, Abraham Lincoln. How can you destroy a statue of Abraham Lincoln, the one man who fought tirelessly and, in most people's opinion, was assassinated as a result that he cared so much about freeing slaves? Why would you destroy a statue of him? I'm at a loss of words. And I say you as the people destroying the statues, because I know these aren't the people that are organizing the protests and running the movements, because I personally met those people and I was interviewing these people when these things happened. So it's important for Northeastern Pennsylvania to understand that while you see this destruction of property, you can't relate that to every person in a protest. Every group has their bad apples. And this group doesn't even have those bad apples, because that's not the people perpetrating this crime. It's difficult for a white person to sit back and say, I understand and I get what you're saying, because we don't. We honestly have no idea. But what we do know as Caucasians, and what you can tell us as African Americans, blacks, you can tell us what we're missing. We need to be educated. There has been 400 years of us educating ourselves, and now it's time for us to listen. And I understand that more than most. And I'm trying so hard to give that platform. But when I'm faced with people saying, well, they're just destroying property, they don't care about their community, they're ruining things. They're not ruining things. They're trying to make a point. And no one is listening. And no one has listened for 400 years. Believe me, I get it. That I do understand. But what you need to understand is we all need to work together. I could not agree anymore that statue needs to go. Do I think it needs to be replaced with another statue? Absolutely not. Why would you want to replace a statue with a statue when you can replace it with unity? We need to stop destroying these statues. The government and people are listening. We are 100% in support. But don't channel it, and don't channel the hate to the wrong places. Don't channel hate anywhere, because it's so much harder to hate somebody if all they do is love you. I assure you of that. This all falls down to two things. There is so much racism still left in our country that we need to stop that. And two, the police have no idea what they're doing. How can you hand someone a gun and tell them that they are now responsible for protecting a community with only 6 months of training, if that? How? You need 4 years to be a doctor, and you're not even controlling a gun. You're saving someone. You're putting them back together. And you're going to tell me within 4 years, within 6 months, they can learn enough training to understand almost every situation? Wrong. That is wrong on so many levels. And we need to focus, and this group needs to sit down and set a list of demands. And these demands need to include the following. Statues need to be put where they belong, in museums. And these museums can only be entered if you want to enter them. This history can only be seen if you want to see and want to remember it. And while we all need to remember our history, and that's not what I'm saying, but what I am saying is we don't need to be reminded of it daily. You don't need to be reminded of your pain daily. And that's a fact. So to move all these would be one of the best demands you can possibly ask. And not only are you not destroying property, you're doing it in a positive way, and you're going to replace it with something that's going to bring culture, art, love, and everything that a community needs. And that's why that's important. Then you need to focus on police and their training. These police are just so undertrained. They don't know how to address a situation. Their psychology levels, frankly, with the interactions I personally had as a Caucasian, the intellectual levels just sometimes aren't there. They aren't able to properly converse, and they tend to get so demonstrative and argumentative that it almost incites violence. And that's something that they need to focus on. They need to learn how to talk to a human being. That is so important and so vital, especially now. And we need to make sure that we are focusing on ensuring that they are doing this. We as whites and we as Americans and we as blacks, we all need to work together. That is the only way this is going to work. We can't fight each other anymore. We can't say it has to be this way or it has to be that way, because then that wouldn't be anything but one or the other. But if we do some of this and some of that, it's unity, it's equality, it's justice, it's everything that we're fighting for. We need to make sure the focus remains where the problems are, on the racism and the fact that police aren't trained properly. We have another shooting that just occurred of Rayshard Brooks. Another extremely unfortunate situation. We have an individual who was intoxicated, who fought with police. He assaulted a police officer. I mean, these are facts. I know it doesn't sound good, and I know it's unfortunate, but this is what he did. And he took the police officer's taser, he aimed that taser at a police officer, and he pulled the trigger. He was an untrained person using a taser, which, while in proper hands, correct, it's not a life-threatening device. But if you shoot somebody in the throat, you shoot somebody in the jugulars, you shoot somebody in the temple, you're going to kill them. It's a taser. You're shooting electronic volts directly to the brain. You can't do it. So it's important to understand that I don't agree with what happened. 100% that man should be alive today. There is not one crime that a human can commit that another person should kill that human. None. None. Until they go through a jury of their peers. There's not one human being that should have the power to eliminate another human being. It's just not right. It's not human. So no, I don't agree with what happened. But at the same time, you have to understand that this isn't necessarily as much a part of the racial movement as it is of the police movement. Please don't lose focus in the fact that this may not be as racially motivated as many were leading it to be. And what's going to end up happening is when they find out that it wasn't racially motivated, you're going to lose power and steam on that movement. And that's what I don't want to happen. You need to keep this focus on the fact that that case was police mistraining and not necessarily racial. And the fact that George Floyd was 100% racial. Ahmaud Arbery, 100% racial. They are racial crimes, and that needs to be addressed as a racial hate crime. But I don't necessarily feel that the Rayshard Brooks would be as racial as many are leading it to believe. This was a split-second decision. This wasn't 8 minutes and 46 seconds of kneeling on an African American's neck. This was 5 seconds after being tackled and shot at with a taser. In this officer's honest opinion, what he has told his lawyer was that he felt that if that guy was able to tase him, he would be able to take his handgun and kill both officers. So in his opinion, and in his honest statement, he was trying to protect the lives of the two officers and any innocent bystanders. Do I agree with it? No. Do I think it's fair? Possibly. But it's not for me to judge, and that's why it's not anything that I need to even comment on. Until we hear the facts, until we see what actually happened, we need to keep the focus where the focus needs to be, and that's on keeping police training proper and keeping racial divide down. That's it. If we can focus on those two things, this movement will have no end. We will get the results that are necessary. Now is a better time than ever. We have a right to elect a new president. We have a right to re-elect the president, depending on your opinions, depending on what is best for you and your community. Don't let anyone else tell you who to vote for. You vote for who you think is best for your country and the country that revolves around you. This is your world too, just as much as it is mine. And we all need to work together. We all need to vote. And we all need to make sure that we're putting people in office that are capable of understanding these demands and presenting them properly to the authorities as necessary. My name is Corey Camasso, and I will continue to cover these Black Lives Matter protests, and I will continue to cover the senseless murders of African Americans, whites, Asians, Hispanics. Everyone needs to be cared for. And we need unity right now, more than anything. We can't have racial divides. Yes, Black Lives Matter. Yes, Asian lives matter. Yes, Mexican lives matter. And yes, white lives matter. But right now, more than ever, Black lives matter. Not because they matter more than whites, but because people don't understand and aren't giving them the respect they deserve. Focus on what matters, and that's fixing America. Right now, Black lives matter. Right now, police need to be trained. Right now, we need to focus on voting. My name is Corey Camasso. I hope you found this video informative, and I hope you understood that we meant it with the most respect possible. We have absolutely no hate for anyone in this world, and our primary goal from the second we created this podcast was to ensure the safety and the longevity of our community. If there's something you see that you don't like in our community, let us know and we'll do our best to address it. If there's a business that has wronged you, let us know. That's our job. We will help you. We are here to fix the problems that the media has technically caused over the past few years. And we will give you the factual information, as unbiased as we possibly can while reporting facts. And we will continue to provide the community with knowledge that is important and will help us continue and move forward. Please like, please subscribe, and please ring the notification bell. We aren't paid for our services, and we do this to benefit the community. So please help us by sharing our videos and helping us share the word. Again, my name's Corey Camasso. This is N.e.p.a. Investigates, a division of critical political thinking. Thanks for watching. Please stay safe. And Black Lives Matter.